Is Goodwill actually a nonprofit? So a few months ago, I made a video where I took a tour of Goodwill's online store, and that video really took off. The chat was blowing up with comments ranging from saying that their CEO gets paid 6 figures to Goodwill doesn't help the less fortunate at all. But we're gonna talk about what I know from my experience and my recent research. Real quick, it takes a lot of time and effort to put together these videos, so if you could take just a quick second to subscribe, it means a lot to me, to the channel, to my family. Thanks for helping. What's interesting is back in October, I had a rep from Goodwill reach out to me to see if I was interested in doing a collaboration. They said that they'd give me creative freedom and that they would compensate me for posting about their website. I replied by saying that the feedback on my video was overwhelmingly negative towards Goodwill and that I would consider a collaboration if I could bring up the negatives for full transparency. Because honestly, my intention in making this last video was not to disparage Goodwill as much as I just wanted to understand why I couldn't find anything of value in their stores. Comments on the video like this were what made the situation truly eye-opening. They replied by saying with it being the end of the year, they'd circle back and get back to me at the beginning of the new year. Interestingly enough, on January 12th, Goodwill began a series of posts of their own that they called Mythbusters. So I thought we'd look at those and see if what they're saying debunks what the people in my comments are saying, and maybe we can find some truth in the gray area. The first one I saw was, your CEO makes millions. To find the truth in this, I had to understand that Goodwill actually has 155 different regions, each one of those having their own board of directors and CEO. And that really complicated my research. So each region is able to run things a little bit differently depending on their area and just their own opinions. The varieties of different Goodwill logos, for example, are endless. And what's funny about some Goodwills is that you could go to one in downtown Denver and they have really expensive prices, and you could go to one in rural Indiana and they're way cheaper. It just depends on what that region has decided to price stuff at. All 150 plus regions fall under the umbrella of Goodwill Industries International and Steve Preston, the CEO of CEOs. Now, the Goodwill website said that a link to guidestar.com would give us the access to the bigwig salaries, but after looking for a while, I could not get access without subscribing to their services. It feels pretty intentional that they lead you on this wild goose chase to find the salaries, and so basically I just gave up and I went to different websites to find the information and discovered that their CEO makes $650,000 a year, and every one of his 10 constituents below him makes 6 figures as well. If $650,000 is the average payout for a Goodwill CEO, and that's very likely, then Goodwill is paying over $100 million a year to just 155 employees. Here's just a handful of salaries from Goodwill execs all around the country. One of my top comments from the video says this: as a reseller, I support any company aiming to maximize profit. However, my biggest gripe is how Goodwill hides behind tax codes and false mission statements. They pay their employees meager wages and treat them poorly under terrible conditions. Meanwhile, the executives get filthy rich. He brings up a good point about what many in the chat had a problem with, the lower level employees being compensated unfairly. There were several comments that mentioned that through a loophole, Goodwill is able to pay disabled employees less than 25 cents an hour. Under Section 4C of the U.S. Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, some people with disabilities can legally be paid pennies an hour. I heard there's a proposal to end that, and rightfully so, but Goodwill says that they don't take advantage of that. They say every individual that works there makes at or above minimum wage. That being said, the federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. The average full-time worker at $7.25 an hour is making less than $15,000 a year. It's a little ironic because of what Goodwill's main mission is. It's to help people improve their lives by providing access to education, employment, and training opportunities. So many comments from my video were people just being absolutely offended by their donations being sold online. People were really upset that their donations weren't going to the less fortunate, but to whoever was going to pay the most on the website. They were upset as well that they thought the money wasn't staying in the local communities. Which takes us to this myth. The money raised goes back to Goodwill Industries headquarters and not into my local community. They say that every dollar spent at Goodwill or at shopgoodwill.com stays in the community and helps support their local programs. But what about Goodwill being a place for the less fortunate to come and shop? Goodwill started out in the early 1900s by a guy named Edgar Helms. He saw a need to provide clothing to the homeless, so he went door to door to collect everybody's old clothes and then distributed them to those who needed it. After a while, he decided that he could assign some of those people that he was giving the clothes to the ability to fix them and to sell them for more money. This way, the less fortunate would have a job, which he thought was a more productive way of helping them out. Goodwill site says, are Goodwill stores there to help low-income families and people with financial difficulties? They answer, while a benefit of our stores is that many people can afford to purchase clothing and household items at deep discounts, our mission is to help people find employment. What a lot of people are misinformed about though is how most thrift stores work. The charitable aspect of most thrift stores isn't who they sell their items to, it's what they choose to do with their profits. This is a huge misconception that people have. I get comments from time to time of people seeing me find a great deal at a thrift store and they go, that was for a poor person, as if I just bypassed some bar that Goodwill had that said, you must be this broke to shop here. Now, I'm not wealthy yet by any means, but Goodwill's gonna take my money or anybody else's who offers it to them. And on top of that, they'll ask you to round up to the next dollar. There's also so much to go around. For example, the EPA estimates that 84% of donated clothing ends up not even being sold by thrift stores, which is where this next myth comes from. What doesn't sell in your stores goes to the local landfills or third world countries. I talked to Goodwill about this very thing in my video, Secrets of the Goodwill Bins. Let's play a clip.
A lot of our product does go overseas, Africa, parts of Asia. So after it's been through the store, after it's been through the outlet, we sell it again.
If products don't sell in the stores, they go to the outlets. If they don't sell in the outlets, then they get baled and sold in bulk to foreign countries. Just the 23 stores in my local region have kept 6.4 million pounds of clothing and goods out of local landfills, which is pretty awesome. They're also squeezing every last dollar that they can out of their donations. Another complaint that people have against Goodwill is that the best stuff gets sold online. Unless you catch them slipping, that's almost always the case from my experience. Goodwill wants to maximize every dollar they can, and they do that by selling on eBay and on their own website.
These are just items that we currently have up. This thing sold for $995. Whoa. Business is good.
Yeah. And as a reseller themselves, they even want to cut out the other resellers, as they told me.
To be honest, we try to cut out the reseller as much as possible. Ultimately, we really want to get the product in the final user's hands.
So many comments in my video about Goodwill's online store were about people not being able to find good deals at Goodwill anymore. And even if there is something that they're interested in buying, the prices have gone up so much just in the last couple of years. Now, it sounds obvious, but it needs to be said. People are always going to pay what something is worth. And something is only worth what someone is going to pay for it. What's nice is that if I go into a thrift store and I don't like their prices, I don't have to buy anything. I choose not to shop there anymore. And with most of the Goodwills in my area, I have no reason to. A lot of people commented on my video and said only a small percentage of profits, if any, get thrown back into Goodwill's mission. But Goodwill claims that 84 cents of every dollar get put back into their programs. The rest goes towards essential support like HR and accounting. And maybe a few FD salaries. But let's talk about what some of those programs are, because a lot of the comments said that they had no idea what kind of impact Goodwill is making in the community. There's a podcast that I found called Purpose and Profit that interviewed the CEO of Goodwill, Steve Preston, and for a good chunk of the conversation, he broke down exactly what programs do what. But essentially, he said that Goodwill's main program focuses on providing free career counseling, skills training, and resume prep services.
We do a number of things in our job centers, and our capabilities often depend on what local market you're in. First of all, we do provide people with the support in that job journey. We help them actually assess some of the other challenges they might have in life that may make it difficult for them to work.
Preston also talked about how other programs they put on differ depending on the needs of each community. When I filmed at a Goodwill in San Diego, they showed me a new mobile employment center they just got where they could travel to areas that people could use help getting jobs at.
Yeah, so these will all be workstations. These are all like, we'll have computers set up and everything, and they can meet with a career advisor in here.
Now, the number one myth that Goodwill wants to debunk, obviously, is that they are for profit. Now, the comments on my video go one of two ways when they hear this information. Some completely disagree and say that Goodwill is a for-profit business. I even thought they were at first. And others say that while they may on paper be nonprofit, that they should have their nonprofit status revoked because they don't meet the criteria of the people for what a nonprofit is. The IRS says about nonprofits that the organization must not be organized or operated for the benefit of private interests, and no part of a Section 501c3 organization's net earnings may inure to the benefit of any private shareholder or individual. Now, when we go back to see every single one of the region's top 10 employees making six figures, it seems to me that their earnings are really benefiting the individuals. It's just funny. I wonder how much money someone would have to make in a nonprofit for the IRS to be like, hey, you can't take that much. That money is actually supposed to be for your programs. This comment says Goodwill's nonprofit status should be revoked. They're scamming the IRS, with 1.9 thousand likes supporting it. Goodwill says that the definition of nonprofit doesn't mean that they're not for profit. It means that the vast majority of the organization's profits are put back into the programs and the services that fulfill their mission, instead of being used to pay the private owner or the company shareholders. Personally, I just don't feel like that's the whole truth. The massive salaries and huge bonuses of the upper management really muddy the water. And I'm not saying the upper management shouldn't be paid well. It takes a lot to run a company like Goodwill efficiently. It just seems like these boards make their salaries the priority over their programs. For how much money each region claims to be bringing in, it's just really weird to me that their programs aren't a more prominent part of the community, that they're not really a talking point in the communities. I haven't heard people talk about like what Goodwill did for them. And although Goodwill stated that it wasn't a priority to provide clothing for the less fortunate, I saw multiple comments on my video talking about how they refuse to give clothing or shoes to homeless people, and that's just really sad when you have so much product available and you get it for free. I realize I'm just scratching the surface with all the information that's out there. I mean, Goodwill isn't evil as so many claim, but they're not the best business practice either by any means. If you like learning about this kind of stuff, I have a few other videos that I think are pretty fun. Recently, I went into a pawn shop to see if I could debunk some of those myths, to see if pawn shops are actually as shady as people make them out to be. That one's a really good video, and that's gonna come up next.